Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map, and I have a video that I wanted to make for a while now, and it's about the Hermit card, because Hermit was a stalker of mine for a while, and the way I work with cards like this are through many layers. So if you notice in your personal readings that you draw a certain card a lot, it comes up, nearly every day or every second day, comes up in important positions when you do spreads and things like that. Um, it's really worth to investigate what this card means for you personally. I'm a little bit of a tarot nerd, so I love going to the source and I love reading about tarot in general and how the meanings and understanding of the cards evolves over the years. And with the Hermit, I've done exactly that. On top of this, what you can do, you can watch my previous video on shamanic experience of the cards. So you can do like a personal shamanic journey with tarot card of the Hermit. You can venture, do like a path working. You can venture into the card, into the Hermit's landscape, into Hermit's world, and personally experience for yourself what it is that that the Hermit is wanting to show you. You could also do something interactive and creative, so you can paint after the meditation with Hermit. You can paint on draw or creative write your own story with Hermit and how you may feel about the Hermit card, when you see it. So another cool idea is to pull the Hermit cards from many different decks that you own. If you have a few, you can just pull all the Hermit cards out and see how, they vary from one another. And that might be something worth doing as well, because each of the decks depict the cards differently. In this particular video, I mostly want to focus on the most traditional decks, so the oldest decks available to us. And and I have some references, some books that I looked through and read through, searching for information about Hermit. And let me tell you, there's quite a few different discrepancies and different ideas. And there is even a huge difference of how we see the Hermit today from, for example, what Edward Waite is giving us in the key into the tarot. So bear with me and let's go. So first of all, let's maybe see in traditional Tarot de Marseille where Hermit is positioned. How do you see it? Like this? Yes. So with this numbering that we are familiar from Marseille Tarot, we can see that Hermit is number 9. Marseille Tarot is additional, so you get 5 and 4 ones. And this is number 8, so the Hermit is kind of shedding its light from the lantern, the hooded lantern, onto the Justice, and kind of turning its back from the Wheel of Fortune, which is the next card. So it's interesting that something which Enrique says in Tarology, and I loved that, what he actually said here. So first of all, he says that the tarot presents us with a set of mental operations that we can use to change the way we think about something. And I think this is fascinating, that you don't take Hermit means loneliness, solitude, I'm going to be old or sick or whatever. I would hate using tarot like that, to put me into a narrow box, to put me into a scarce field, to put me into a fearful attitude. What I want to use tarot for is to change the way I think of something, to let me expand my idea of how I think about it, because these are such vast archetypal energies, and the way we look at things can shift, it's not set in stone. Sometimes it's hard to do, but it's very possible, and we do it all the time. So the tarot presents us with a set of mental operations that we can use to change the way we think of something. And what he goes on about in Tarology, Enrique, he says, if we accept one of the tarot characters as real beings that stand before us, inviting us to mimic their actions, we will find ourselves enacting Abramovich's prediction, which he speaks about that the artist will just sit or stand like the samurai of Japan, looking at each other and transmitting energy. So when we would like to enact Hermit, we would, hold the lantern in our right or left hand, depends how you see the tarot, as a reflection or as enactment. You can hold it in the right, face towards the left, hold the stick, the wand in the staff in the left hand, and so on. Or some people would do the opposite because they see the tarot as a reflection of the person. In any case, here Enrique speaks about Hermit in this way. In front of us, the lantern's light shows us where we came from. So where we came from, Hermit is shedding his light, his lantern, on the justice. In a procession of cards, the Hermit knows the universal law of justice. He learned the balance that justice creates to keep the world in, the ever-flowing and kind of balanced ways. The Hermit knows what he experienced. So in this way, Hermit is facing his past, where he came from. His light is kind of shedding the light on his previous experiences. So we know what we have experienced. Behind us, the lantern's light casts our own shadow, obscuring the future. Can you see how, just as the letter L, because that's how the Hermit starts, like on Dodal, it's Lermit. So Enrique compares Hermit to letter L when he deciphers all the wording as well, which in his theory, this is also important to decipher the cards. It's like the language of the birds. So he compares Hermit to letter L, and it says that letter L is a letter I, so I with a little side line, which is the shadow of the eye cast on earth. So in here, the lantern's light casts our own shadow, obscuring the future. So can you just see how the letter L is a letter I projecting its shadow on the ground? And there's nothing behind Lermit, so Hermit. And we know that behind Hermit is the Wheel of Fortune if we look at the numerology. So now is the Hermit trying to escape change? Is the Hermit trying to see where he came from before he moves into the next phase, into the Wheel of Fortune? Hermit is also number 9, is the ending of the cycle, and then we go into 10, the beginning of the new cycle. So it seems like Hermit is a very critical card before we embark on a quite prominent change. And it's interesting how, it's always weird in the camera, it's interesting how the Hermit is kind of turning his back onto the future. But in the light of what Enrique writes, maybe it's not that he's turning his back on it. The future is obscured by its shadow, so he knows what he experienced when he sheds his light onto the past, but he doesn't know what the change will bring. So this is quite interesting. So when we just look at the directionality, the Hermit walks backwards, inviting us to trust that there will always be a way, even if the light of reason hasn't discovered it yet. So it's quite an interesting way of looking at the Hermit, I think. It's the same way in the oldest deck of Tarot de Marseille that we know. And this is the Jean Noblet. So it's the same way. And it's interesting how the Justice just looks straight at you. The Hermit looks at Justice, and then there is the Wheel of Fortune, the change that comes after the Hermit. So from the positioning, as I said, the Hermit, it's interesting, and he does look like an old man with a lantern, right? So we can maybe suspect that he knows quite a lot, he experienced quite a lot, and now still staying in the same spot means death. Everything has to change again. So he's changing, and he goes into the Wheel of Fortune, which then in 11 in Tarot de Marseille means strength. So then he gains strength to, or he needs strength to go into the next chapter of his life. In Rider-Waite-Smith, we have a little bit of a, well, similar but not, because here the Hermit is shedding his light onto the strength, and then so first he maybe looked at his experiences, at what he experienced, what strength he gathered over the years, and then there is Justice coming after the change. So, you can see both ways as okay. They both make sense. I do prefer to have that connection, because you usually need a lot of strength after changes, and you introduce a new balance, your own personal balance with mind of what you've experienced, of the universal balance. But yeah, both make sense. So if you're using it this way, you can also make it work perfectly fine. It's interesting to note that in the old Tarot de Marseille decks, the lantern is hooded, like it's kind of protected on one side, whereas in Rider-Waite it's not. It's fully exposed, and there's a star shining in this one, whereas here we don't know. It's just kind of colors. And it's interesting to see what White writes about the Hermit, because first of all, there's a few ways. So here in the class 1 on the trumps, he writes that in a more philosophical language, the Hermit can be seen as a sage or as a wise man. He's said to be in the search of that truth which is located far off in the sequence, and of justice which has preceded him on the way. So it's interesting that he writes that justice preceded him on the way, yet we know that in Rider-Waite-Smith, strength precedes the Hermit. But maybe here he describes what is kind of being said about Hermit. But this is a card of attainment. So this is interesting, because usually we see this as a Hermit as a spiritual seeker, as a need to go on a quest, but also a card of experience. But here it's the card of attainment, as we shall see later, rather than a card of quest. Also in Golden Dawn, when we look at the card of the Hermit, we know that he is actually ready to come from the underworld, where there's a fertilization of the morphic egg, and there's the spermaton also, when he's bringing his light out from, like, he's under the wheat sheets in the underworld and coming up with this fertile energy. So this is a sign, the card connected to Virgo also. So it's quite a, here it seems so barren and so different to this hermit. So here he nevertheless speaks that this is a card of attainment, not the card of a quest. But it is also said that his lantern contains the light of occult science and that his staff is a magic wand. And then White says to that, these interpretations may be true after their own manner, but they miss all the high things to which the greater arcana should be allocated. So, and then what he writes about his approach to Hermit, he says that the variation in this card is only that the lamp is not enveloped partially in the mantle of its bearer, who blends the idea of the ancient days with the light of the world. It is a star which shines in the lantern here. And as I mentioned before, it's not enveloped. So here the cloak is kind of let loose, and here we see that the part of the cloak is being held by the hermit. So he's maybe the lantern, the light of the knowledge is not for everybody. Maybe it's a card of an initiation here. Here it's maybe for everybody who wants to attain. And here he says, after White, I have said that this card is a card of attainment, and to extend this idea, the figure is seen holding up his beacon on a high place. So he mentions the positioning of the lantern. Therefore, the hermit is not, as Court de Gébelin explained, a wise man in search of truth and justice, nor is he, as a later explanation proposes, an especial example of experience. His beacon intimates that where I am, you also may be. Where is the hermit, you also may be. So it's like a guru, like a teacher, maybe more like someone who attained wisdom. That's quite interesting in this regards. So where I am, you also may be. Divinatory meanings from also the key of the tarot, where it's a prudence, but also treason, dissimulation, roguery, corruption, in reversed concealment, disguise, policy, fear, unreasoned caution. So it's not a very kind of positively seen card when you get it. I also have this beautiful deck, Thomson Lang Tarot from 1935, and here in Thomson Lang, in this little booklet, it says that past experience should be considered when planning for the future. Someone is seeking to harm you, but plotting against you will fail, and reversed, too much caution may be imprudent. So that's the meaning of the hermit from this deck. I looked at the Medicine Inner Woman Inner Guidebook, and here the hermit is the number and meaning is 9, completion and foundation, and it's called the guide. So very often when hermit comes up in the spreads or in our readings, we can see it also as a guide. So either connecting to spiritual guides or connecting to a wise teacher, to someone who can maybe help us go through initiation or recognize something from our past, so then we can move smoothly through the transition that is ahead of us. So here there's the guide, and self-questioning is, do I now seek the spirit with my whole heart? Some exercises: for one day, drink only juices, eat no food. For one day, do not speak. Be alone for 24 hours straight. These may all be done at once or at the same day if you wish, so a little bit like a retreat. What's interesting, since Hermit started stalking me, I did sign up for another meditation retreat. I do Vipassana. I have done 2 10-day retreats, so this one will be the 3rd, and I'm going in November. So maybe that's something which the Hermit was also kind of prompting me to do. I was thinking about it for a while, and finally, I've done it. I wanted to also show you Hermit from the Erturia Tarot. And here we have something interesting, because here the numbering is totally different. So let's say we start with strength, which is 7, then we get 8, which is justice, and then we have 9. So after justice comes wheel of fortune, and then we have 10, which is the chariot, and then we have 11, which is the old man, you know, the Saturn, the Hermit. Hopefully this is kind of something similar to the Hermit. And I don't know, I just thought like, oh, maybe he had accident because he rode too fast. So yeah, just bear in mind that the numbering in tarot could vary, and it's different. I also love particularly the idea of the light of introspection from Tarot of Transformation, where the Hermit was turned into the crone around the age of 50. Each of us has our Chiron return, and to me this is kind of a integration of this wounding and also initiation into the elderhood and cronehood. This is quite an important time between 50 and 52. It usually takes around 2 years as an intro into this elderhood and cronehood, and that's kind of like halfway, you know, through our lives. So this light of introspection is interesting. And here also, you know, it's the crone that kind of brings the wisdom into the community. In this tarot deck, it says that the crone doesn't need to be alone. She doesn't need to be with others constantly either. So she moves back and forth in a natural rhythm between solitude and community, bringing the wisdom from her inner search to enrich her relationships with others. She becomes of service to others, not by leaving herself behind, but by being herself fully. And I think that's what the cronehood and elderhood really invites us to do, to be ourselves fully and uncompromised, without the compromise, you know, like that's who we are, and shining that light of our life experiences and really claiming this power of guidance, of wisdom, of being present to the cycles, to the body, because that's where the wisdom comes from. The crone brings illumination, you know. Having learned to heal herself, that's where I thought of this Chiron return. She may now function as a healer also, and she may offer gifts of divination and prophecy as well. And also, you know, there's these personal cycles that we go through. So a good example is our attitudes towards illness and aging, both of which are stages of physical decline. But decline has its place, as each phase has its place. So this comparison to the phases of the moon, and the crone has learned to harmonize with it. If things are in a phase of decline, she honors the decline. If energies are building, she cooperates with that. So this is also, it's only by entering into the unknown that we make it known. And eventually this inward journey takes us beyond the confines of the personality into the larger mysteries. So we can connect through this journey of, you know, solitude in a way, and introspection with our wider idea of who we are. In Jodorowsky's book, it's also interesting that he compares Hermit to a fetus. So he says that, let me just read it to you because it's quite interesting. So this is number 9, right? It's a first number that is divisible by another number than itself. And here he says that the Hermit can be compared to the fetus that in the 8th month has attained its full development in utero. In a way, maybe some form of perfection, perfect balance, which has to be disrupted by the constant change of, that's the nature of things. So Hermit has to leave that perfect balance. All his organs are already formed, and he's lacking for nothing during the 9th month. The fetus The fetus prepares to abandon the womb, the soul environment it knows, in order to enter the new world. So the number 9 announces both an end and the beginning, and the hermit actively terminates his relationship with the old world and becomes receptive towards an unknown future over which he experiences no mastery. In distinction to the Pope, who casts a bridge toward an ideal and knew where it went, the hermit represents passage into the unknown. In this sense, he represents the highest form of wisdom as well as a state of profound crisis. So it's interesting that here also in a reading, Chodorowski states, because he's quite psychological, that the crisis when hermit comes up cannot be avoided, and a profound change that needs to be confronted and accepted is coming. Also, it evokes an idea of a teacher, therapist, or a guide. In crisis, he states it's a very equal possibility to, renew yourself or die. So therefore, hermit refers to poverty, solitude, and even decay and degeneration. And he says that hermit is like the direct opposite to the sun card. When sun is warmth and beauty and livelihood, when hermit is kind of old and stiff and cold. Sun is like the archetypal father, and here Chodorowski says that hermit can represent or depict an absent father, one who is taciturn, remote, or vanished. So also in the reading you can look at it from this perspective. And also he refers for the subject of the reading to an inner solitude, to secret and dark space where a spiritual transformation is prepared. So often going to a retreat like I did, the meditation retreat, can be a great way to really connect or practically use the guidance of the hermit, because we are all the archetypes as well, so we are the hermit deep inside. So connecting to that state might be very much easier done through withdrawal from the outside world. And I think that's it. There's some practical advices in Dark Goddess Tarot, and she says here, Ellen Lorenzi Prince, what appear as odd distractions or challenges can bring you to a rewarding place. Trust the momentum of your soul's journey. Do not rethink each step. Do not judge the worth of an experience until you have undergone it. Virtue and honesty may not prevail in sophisticated places, but they do in the forests. Know where to find authenticity. Turn away from false spirits that do not lead you through. Within nature, within your mind, seek out the still and sacred places where magic is heard and felt and seen. Spend enough time to feel this is an integral part of who you are. Learn through experience over instruction. Follow intuition over authority. So you are your own authority. Know thyself. Ask invisible friends to be your companions. This is a good time to explore or deepen relationships with unseen beings. That's where the guide kind of idea comes through. So I hope this was an interesting chapter on Study Tarot. I would love to hear about your experiences with Hermit. So if you have anything you wish to share, please drop me a comment below. I'd love to learn from you as well. And I speak to you soon. Bye.